Well, Interbrand released its 2013 Best Global Green Brands report. The report examines the gap that exists between a corporation's environmental practices and consumers' perceptions of those practices. Joining us now for a look at Best Global Green Brands is Jeremy Sampson. He's Group Chairman at Interbrand. That's quite a tongue twister if you say it out loud, but let's take a look, Jeremy, at what exactly is surveyed when it comes to this report, how you come up with the rankings.
Basically, this is the third year that Interbrand looks at its rankings of the best global brands by value and then puts them through a second process of looking at their green aspects. So Interbrand looks at about 6 perceptual aspects of the brand, its performance, etc. But then the actual performance part is measured by Deloitte. So between the two systems, you put it through the sieve. The Deloitte system, for instance, has something like 83 touch points that it measures. Interbrand has a lot as well. And then you put it all together, and out of that you get the rankings. But also you get the gap between performance versus perception.
Yeah.
Some brands are perceived as very green. They're not as green as you might think they are, whereas others are underperforming. So this is one of the ways of measuring things. I think in business today, everyone wants to measure things more and more. So this is yet another analytic measure, as it were, of checking out the green and the sustainability aspect of a brand.
So let's take a look at who's ranked at the top. Surprisingly, it's the automotive sector that dominates. We've had Toyota followed by Ford and then Honda claiming those top 3 spots on the ranking. I mean, talk us through that and what you make of this trend, if we can call it that, that's emerged.
I think one of the things about all of us is we're becoming more conscious of our planet, and especially younger people. And younger people especially want brands that are greener or more environmentally friendly. And I think Toyota started some years ago with the Prius, using that as an angle, as it were, to create more sales, as a marketing angle. And then the other guys realized that if they didn't play catch-up very quickly, they would be at a disadvantage. Because that's where people will say, well, the car will do from 0 to 100, whatever, but also on the environmental issues, we do this and this and this. And that's where the whole automotive area has responded. I think it's quite surprising that Volkswagen, which has said it's green, is actually slipped back. As you say, these companies at the top seem to have been moving away. But within a whole category, everyone is claiming green status, and that's very crucial.
Yeah, looking at companies that, are more green than they're perceived to be, what's actually pulling them back in terms of, communicating what they're actually doing and getting the right perceptions out there?
Well, this is where the perception versus performance comes in. I think perceptually you can say you're green, you're green, you're green, as BP did, but then they have some instances where things go badly wrong and people start using that horrible word brand washing and greenwashing, and this is where greenwashing can come into play. Whereas now, especially through the Deloitte analytics, you can actually measure the actuality of the brand and what it's doing. Now, is it cutting back on the use of water? Is it cutting back on carbon footprints and these sorts of things? Is it cutting back on using virgin materials when it can use reusable materials? Now, one of the stats I've seen in here is that the average Ford car takes 4 square meters of water to produce. I don't know about you, but I have a problem getting my mind around that. But it just shows you, how much water goes into producing a pint of beer, for instance. And these are all sustainable issues because we know that we lack enough water, we lack a lot of other things in this planet, and those resources are actually shrinking. So this is where these companies have to respond to the new demands of today.
Let's look at those companies that are responding, because we've highlighted the top performers in terms of this year's report, but then the top risers to take into consideration as well, and that alludes to the fact that they're making significant stride in getting their acts together, if we can call it that.
Well, one of them, again, is in the automotive field, and Nissan has responded very, very strongly. Its Leaf vehicle, I don't think it's available in South Africa, but it's been around for several years in the States. People like Ford have responded very strongly. I think it surprises people that Nokia is very active there. Nokia actually has a resource around the world that you can actually, when you finish using your Nokia, you can actually hand it back into Nokia and it gets recycled. So this is one of the things they're doing, so that that these minerals, gases, whatever, aren't put in open dumps, as it were. They go back to Nokia and they can recycle them. So this is where companies like that are responding very strongly.
Yeah, if we're taking a look at the key themes and trends that have emerged in this year's report, what stands out is the fact that we've got technology brands specifically dominating the overall report. I mean, is there a specific reason for that? Let's go through some of the detail there. Nokia, of course, falling within that segment.
People like Panasonic. It's not a brand that perhaps has been as strong as it used to be in South Africa, but around the world it's making huge efforts through its manufacturing, but through then, once it moves into a country, has its own manufacturing facility, but then fitting in with the environment, being very sensitive, again, to water issues, emissions issues, dumping issues, working with the community. Because apart from the green issues on sustainability, of course, there are other aspects like how do you treat your staff, etc., etc. So it's an environmental and also it's a community issue.
How much attention do companies pay to reports like these so that they want to up their game moving forward? Surely they do need to be paying attention because they want to keep their consumers happy, and that obviously translates to profitability at the end of the day. But do they pay enough attention to reports like these?
Well, very good question. In the States, I think Dow Jones has a similar sort of ranking of green issues. But in a lot of countries, especially third world emerging countries as we are in Africa, those are things where people say, well, do we really, as you've just said, do we really have to pay attention? But I think they especially have to pay attention when the global people, as listed here, are active in South Africa and they're practicing, as they have to, this best behavior, best green behavior, developing, again, as we said, with the environment and the community. So local competitors really need to respond and match if they can.